What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Ruben and Jessie podcast. As always, I am Jessie.
And I'm Ruben.
And if this is your first time, this is not your last. What is going on, Ruben?
Feeling good in this beautiful California day. I'm so
Mm.
ready to go out for a run after we finish our podcast today. So, how about
Amazing.
you, man? I know you just finished your day, our time difference. But
Yeah, I mean, the day is still a little bit strong. It's only 3 o'clock here, but it's definitely a beautiful weather. I wouldn't necessarily say is what we have here today. It's been kind of gloomy, but it was fun. I was riding my bike around the city, and uh, uh, it looked like apocalypse now out there. It's kind of cool. Um, but I'm home. I just had a meal, and I'm ready to have this conversation, brother. This is gonna be a fun one.
yes, yes, for those folks, you probably seen whatever title we decide to make this. But this is going to be a relationship episode all about relationships, particularly intimate relationships with a partner, a significant other, whatever, wife, husband, multiple partner, whatever that may look like for you. That's what we're going to kind of dig into. And I want to start with Jessie's most recent experience with relationships. So, Jessie, I think you can start wherever you want, but the folks you might have mentioned in previous podcasts, but folks don't know. And now it's a good time to let them know. So, where are
Let
you
the
at,
people
man?
know
Where are you
what's
at?
been going on. Yeah,
Yes.
man. Yeah, I'm stoked to have this conversation. So, and especially, if you watch the episodes on YouTube, you will see that I am now in a very different background, because my a girl that I was with for almost 3 years, it's coming up on 3 years, we have decided to shift our relationship outside of a romantic one. And now we are still best of friends. And we still hang out, still see each other, still, enjoy each other's company, but we're just no longer romantic and involved with each other in that way. We were living together. I decided to move out. Now I'm on my own in a different part of New York City. And yeah, your boy is living that solo life, solo dolo right now. He's
Oh
out
yeah,
here.
that bachelor life right now.
That bachelor lifestyle. Huh. um, so yeah, man. So I'm out here, and that's the short of it. But of course, we're gonna get into the long of it. And
Right.
so yeah, so to kind of go into the story a little bit, because I think our story is unique. Um, Especially the fact that we're still best friends and we're hanging out. So many of my, especially my guy friends, they're just like, "What? Like, what do you mean you guys are still best friends?" I'm like, "Yeah, we're still best friends. Like, it's cool." Um, and so basically, what it's funny because I've shared this story a few times with different people, and I feel like every time I share it, it's kind of different because you
Right.
kind of have different perspective on it, or depending what mood you're in, you can be talking about it differently. Um, but basically, let's just say 2020 just to begin with. 2020 was a very fascinating year, eye-opening year for a lot of people. It definitely, for myself, I felt many times like I was in a pressure cooker, um, because from the moment, I was living in, anyone who's been with us long enough knows that I was living in San Diego. I was working for the Czech Institute, and I had moved back to the city 2 weeks before the shutdown. And when I moved back, I had gotten a job, and the day after the shutdown happened. And that was kind of a snowball into what was the rest of the year, because there was, intense levels of uncertainty. I ultimately, the job trend, what the place was, transitioned into a different type of environment, a more digital environment. So they brought me on the team from there. but it was a absolute startup, like from ground zero startup. And so there was a lot of chaos happening there, chaos happening in the collective. And I had come back from San Diego not in a good place. It's funny how fast time flies, because that feels like it was so long ago, but it really wasn't. It
Not
was
at all.
like yesterday, like, and the difference in like the place I'm in now versus then is it's just miles apart.
You said it, pressure cooker, bro.
Yeah, I was in the pressure, so I came back from San Diego really not in a healthy mindset, and me and her name is Valentina, the girl who I was dating. So me and Valentina were still together throughout that time when I was in San Diego. I came back and moved back in with her. And like I said, I was not in a good headspace to begin with. And then the shutdown happens, and now we're with each other all the time. And fortunately, as time went on, I started to, pick myself up and get my shit together, and started making progress and moving through what I was going through in the beginning of the year. And so we're moving through the year. Everything is as good as it can be, with the working for the startup, and dealing with the collective consciousness at the time because of all the fear surrounding COVID. And as you know, Ruben, we had many conversations, because I was in it. I was really in the thick of it. You can even listen to some earlier episodes where I was just pissed off, and I would say that was a lot of 2020 was me being pissed off because of the fact that, I had just finished reading Mark Hyman's Food Fix only a few months before we started having a deeper understanding of what COVID was. Because in the first few months, I was just like everyone. I was concerned because, the numbers, they were saying the numbers were crazy. They didn't really understand what this thing was. And it was definitely frightening. And then as the months went on, things started to come out, and things that were really fishy were starting to come out. And we saw that, people aren't reacting to this the way we thought. And then I started looking at the companies and the brands that were behind a lot of the financial decisions that were being made around this disease. I started getting freaking mad, because I was like, funny enough, these are the same companies and same brands and same organizations that were in Food Fix, that Mark Hyman whistleblowed on for, doing shady shit for so many years. And I just found myself so much in the depth of it during that time, because it seemed like it was just put right in front of my face. And then I had to deal with people around me, including Valentino, who did not necessarily see eye to eye on these things, because they just didn't have the information that I had, and didn't, weren't so deeply invested in the world of health and nutrition and fitness as I am, right? And at the time, I didn't have the compassion for these people at all. It's just, this is how I feel about the situation. And so moving on, then George Floyd happened. The murder of George Floyd on video, and that shook the world again. And then even more frustration began to pile on me, because when someone looks at me, they obviously see a white person. And just the, we won't get deep into it in this podcast. It's not relevant, but just the insanity that began to unfold around Black, white, and a lot of it is necessary. Don't get me wrong. I'm happy these conversations are being had. And of course, where I was at the time was I started to see, I was paying attention to the things that were not fair, or were not working, or did not make sense, and decided to harp on those things, which also drove me bananas. And so it was just like a cycle of me going bananas in 2020, at the world, at myself. And so near the end of the year, near the end of the year, some things started to happen, and I look back and I wonder if it really was because of how deeply involved I was in the negativity that was surrounding the world, and how deeply involved I was in the lack of fairness, or whatever you want to say, how identified I was with it, that these things manifested in my life all at once. Because it was like, yo, you either fucking wake up and have a life affirming attitude, or we're just going to drive you deeper into this hole. Because the way things happened was very fascinating. To start off, we started, I ended up, this was like maybe mid-November. And I downloaded Gaia TV. And that's when I started watching Missing Links,
Yep.
with Greg Braden on Gaia TV. And that show was very, that show was filmed in like 2016, but it had amazing foresight into what was coming. Because the first episode talks about the convergence of these three unique times in our lives where politics is changing, where like you would see these patterns that would happen over centuries of human life. And it said that we are entering a very particular time, because we're seeing, if I remember it correctly, it was like we're seeing the height of politics, the height of climate change, which is a cyclical pattern that they've identified, and that you could go watch the show and get all the science behind it. But climate change, economics, and politics were, I believe those were the three. And when I say politics, I mean culture, whether that's war or peace, times of war and peace, times of ideas being changed, and then economics, the money going through cycles, and then the climate going through cycles. And we were reaching this apex where all these three things are happening at the same time. And 2020 was very much a culmination of all of these things.
And they said it in the show, folks. Like they said it, 2020 was going to be the year, and it's kind of scary that.
Yeah. They said 2020 was the peak. 2020 was the next peak that we were going to hit. And this show was filmed in 2016. And the whole show goes on to express and showcase how we have the power to navigate these times, effectively. And it was such a blessing that the show came into my life for what was to, proceed after that, because I had remember we watched that episode about heart math and the power of the heart, and I had already, we already had Bruce Cryer on the show. We already, we knew about heart math. I've heard about it before, and but something about the way Greg was expressing it and explaining it, and just how I saw myself in my life at the time, where I was just in a constant state of just anger, just so much anger at the world and at myself. I began to practice the heart coherence techniques, and immediately I felt the difference. The moment I started doing them, I immediately started to feel more grounded, more in touch with my body, more safe, just more with myself. And it was cool. I started doing this practice. It was fine. And then come December, like last month of 2020, things just unfolded in this insane way, where I get a call. No, I call my mother, and she's not sounding too good at all. And basically, what happened was that my grandmother, who was dealing with dementia for almost 4 years now, got to the point where, and my grandfather was taking care of her. My grandfather's a very stubborn man, did not want anyone's help. And it got to the point where he could no longer do anything. She basically fell to the ground, and my grandfather couldn't pick her up anymore because she was just absolute dead weight. So my brother and my parents had to go over there, get her, and then they put her in a nursing home, and all this family drama, whatever. And then going to go see my grandfather, the next day was very intense, because I had never seen him like that. And so it was like, this family dynamic was starting to impede. And then so I see my grandfather in a way I've never seen him before, which was intense. And then the next day, or over the next few days, I find out that everyone in my family has COVID. My grandfather, my mother, my brother, my father, my aunts, uncles, everybody who was there with my grandmother at the time has COVID, except me. I didn't have COVID, and I did get tested at the time. And which was in its own way a very intense moment between me and Valentina, because we had opposing views as to what COVID is and was. And as much as she would be patient with my perspective and my understanding, once she found out that my family had COVID and I had interacted with my family, that did not sit well with her. And I am a very opinionated person in my own right. So that's, we started going, kind of
Question heads.
Crashing with each other at the time. And it was fine. But then very quickly, my mother started to react very poorly to this thing, to the COVID. My mother's diabetic, and she's definitely one of the more susceptible types to this thing. And she didn't sound great on the phone. But I'm a very optimistic person, so I figured, yeah, she's gonna be fine. Like, it's gonna be okay. And then one day I'm on the phone with her, and she's at the hospital. And basically, we found out that her lungs were taken up by the disease, like 40%. They were hit, and she was sounding terrible. She was in the hospital for almost a week and a half to 2 weeks, and it was frightening. It was very frightening. No one could go see her, no one could go be with her, and she sounded terrible. Like, and even the doctor, when we were on the phone, he basically said, we were lucky that she came in when she did, because otherwise it would not have ended well. And I'm saying this to you now in a few sentences, but at the time, these were days. These things were coming to me in days apart from each other. And so there was a moment where I was reconciling, like, what's about to happen to my mother? Like, I don't know what's about to happen. And as anyone understands, family dynamics are very complex. And so I wasn't only thinking about, what's going to happen to my mother? I was thinking, okay, if something happens to my mother, how am I going to resolve a lot of these outstanding complexities that are going on in my family? As anyone who's listening would understand what I'm saying. And it was so out of nowhere. Like this, when it all happened, it happened so fast, and time flew. I remember thinking it was like 2 weeks when all this was happening. And then I was talking to my mom, and she's like, no, it was 5 weeks ago. I was like, that was 5 weeks ago. Time was all over the place. So then that happens. And then while my mother's in the hospital, we find out that my grandmother has been sent to the ICU. So my grandmother's at the ICU while my mother is in the hospital. My family, the rest of my family still has COVID. Then my mother gets out of the hospital. And then at the time, I also started reading a book called It Didn't Start With You, which we have already done a whole podcast on. And I had a very intense awakening, I would say, and breakthrough during reading that book, between my father and the lineage of my father. And I, what's it called? That happened. I called my father. We talked about a lot of things that we never discussed before. I let go of a lot of, pain that I had towards my father and all these things. And that day really shook me up, because there were things that I had been dealing with from the age of 12 that now showed up and got released in my reality. And then that same evening, I'm going to go get a haircut. I'm on my way to go get a haircut, and I get a call from my dad. And I'm thinking he wants to talk about, more about what we talked about that morning, whatever. And I pick up the phone, and he basically tells me my grandmother passed away in the ICU. And I was like, whoa. In many ways, I wasn't particularly brokenhearted by it, because she had not been herself for years at this point. If anyone who knows had experienced dementia, they become a shell of themselves, as time goes on. So in many ways, I was relieved that it happened, because now people can, it's almost like this slow burn that just continues on and on. And so that happened. And like a few days later, the startup that I was working for basically had to reconcile other finances, and I was switched over to an independent contractor for the team instead of a full-time employee, and my hours were cut in half. And this is all at the same time. And at that point, I had to start hustling, and so I did. And I began to, fortunately, one of our teammates, I became really close with him. He had opportunities outside of the company, and we started to rally and get together and start working on projects outside of this one and all these things. And I was working like 12-hour days, like no shit. I was working 12-hour days every day of the week, just, trying to figure some shit out. Meanwhile, my partner is not experiencing the same things at all.
Right.
And I wouldn't want her to. I wouldn't want her to experience the same things. Of course not. In many ways, there were changes that came into her life that were very beneficial to her and put her in a different stratosphere of success, of comfort, of livelihood, and all these things. And things are fine. Things are fine on all fronts in her life, and I'm happy that they were. I'm very, very happy that they were. However, and a lot of what I was experiencing was places I've been before, things I felt before I understood. And it wasn't necessarily something that she had experienced before. And I would actually also say some of these things are new, whether, almost losing my mother, losing my grandmother, my financial stability completely out of whack. All these things were like hitting me. And then the thing that, that happened with the awakening between the stuff that I experienced with my father, I started to notice that anytime I was spending with Valentina, I did not want to spend it with her. And the reason was not because I didn't love her, didn't like her, didn't enjoy her company. It was just that with everything that had gone on, I felt as if I had no space to process anything that just occurred. And there's a lot that occurred. And because I was hustling to get on my feet again financially, anytime I decided to be with her, because I recognize that I am her boyfriend, we're in a relationship, and I want to commit time to this relationship. I want to commit to being here for her. And I, because I'm good at being there for other people, I would just, I put on my man face and my boyfriend face and just be there and spend time with her. And that more and more started to drive me crazy. it started to drive me really crazy. And it showed up because we would get into little fights, we get into little arguments. I'd get upset at her about things that like were miscellaneous and stupid, and I would just get really frustrated or even envious. At times I would get envious of her because I'm like, I'm dealing with all of this shit and you're fucking chilling. You know, this is what I would say in my head. Like, you're fucking chilling. I'm dealing with all this shit. And I felt as if, you know, like, what the fuck is going on? You know, and I didn't like that I was feeling that way. I didn't like that I was showing up in that way. And then basically it got to the point where you know, it's funny how this, because I'm going to be honest here. Like, it's funny how the subconscious works or whatever. I don't know. I don't want to label part of my brain or my heart new to do this, but I began to, speaking of that, one other thing I wanted to say, why I was talking about missing links at the time earlier, was because while all this is going on, I'm doing the heart coherence practices. And it was really the only thing that was keeping me, you know, up and stable during these times, because it would always ground me. And it was something I enjoyed that time alone. I enjoyed that time with myself. And every time I was in that moment with myself, I wanted to be more in that time with myself. And you know, if you live with a partner during the pandemic, you are with each other all the time, every hour of the day. And so that was another thing that was coming up for me, just this desire to be more alone, to be more by myself, you know, to be more autonomous. And one day, where I forgot even what we were talking about, but I got really angry, I got upset, and I was just like, I started to set some ultimatums. You know, this part of it was ugly. I'm not even gonna lie, this part of it was ugly because I started to set some ultimatums. I was like, well, if you don't want to do this, then I don't think we should be together. And she's like, I don't want to do this. And I was like, well, then I don't think we should be together. And she said, okay. And it was like a day of silence after that. You know, it's a day of not talking to each other. Because I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go look for another place. And I did, started looking for another place. And it was so abrupt. It was a day of silence. And then a day passed. And then I was just, hey, we should talk at some point before I go, you know. We should have a conversation. And so we started having a conversation. And the moment I started talking, I basically started to break down, because whatever that thing was that I said to initiate the separation was not at all what was the truth. It was true that I wanted to separate, but the reason was not the truth. And then I started to realize that basically, you know, one day I would want to have Valentina on here to talk about this, because you know, I can't give her enough credit for how she showed up at the moment at that time. But basically, the reason why I decided to separate was, you know, outside of any relationship where things just don't work, you know, certain things don't work, certain things work, and you commit to showing up, you know, in the relationship and dealing with whatever you guys are going through. But at that moment, I was in a place, because everything outside of the relationship, you know, I've said this, with everything within our relationship was beautiful and on equal terms, and we were good. But outside of our relationship, we were in two different worlds. You know, outside of each other, we were in two different worlds on every plane of reality. We were in different universes. And I basically realized that I was like, hey, I'm not fit to be here for you and to show up how I would want to show up, not even how you would want me to show up, how I would want to show up for this relationship, because of everything that just occurred. And I need to get, you know, I was still at the time figuring out what I was doing for my career and my work. I got launched into being an independent contractor and had to figure out how to navigate that entire landscape that I never did before. And so I was like, hey, I need to still figure out this shit, and I need to figure out what the fuck just happened in my life, with my grandmother, with my mother, with everything that you guys have heard so far. And I just started breaking down because there's this insane amount of pressure that I said, I mentioned earlier, this started really when I came back from San Diego, of feeling so much anger and frustration. And I felt like I was just pedaling along. And throughout that entire time, even from before, if I really look at it, I didn't feel like I was showing up the way I really wanted to in that relationship. And then that pressure cooker, November, December, just took it all the way. And so, like I said, to be honest, the reason we separated was because I didn't feel fit to be there the way I wanted to show up for her and for myself. It was also a matter of pride in many ways. And I'm not ashamed to say that, like, I am a prideful man, and there's a certain way I want to be. There's some things I want to offer when I'm with a partner. And the fact that I couldn't offer these things, it drove me crazy. It drove me nuts. The way I wanted, I'll also just say this, the way I wanted to be supported wasn't something that it seemed Valentina was ready for or even interested in. And that's not a judgment of right or wrong. That's more of just where she was and how she was, or how she is, her where she leans naturally as a person just wasn't exactly what I needed at that time. And so then we chose to separate. And, up until the last moment, we were still, I was giving each other hugs and reassuring that, you're my friend, you're my best friend. We've been through 3 years of thick and thin together, like, that doesn't just go away. We're going to continue to be friends. And I stuck to it. We've stuck to it. We've continued to talk, often, hang out often, enjoy each other's presence. And, for myself, it was absolutely the right decision, moving into a place for myself. And it gave me space to hustle hard for, my career. And I'm in a much better place now than I was just a few months ago. It's allowed me to deepen my spiritual practice, to process the things that occurred over the last few months. And I just feel like a different person. I feel way more optimistic and understanding and compassionate of the world and of myself. Because when I look back at this previous year and how I showed up, it's like, it wasn't my best, it wasn't my best. And I think that's probably true for a lot of people. And I'm excited with 2021 and moving forward, as in with the knowledge I've gained, or even the knowledge that I was reminded of what I'm capable as a person, and how to be compassionate towards others, and how to be more understanding, and how to take my time and create space for myself. It's opened up a new world for me. And so that's the long of it, as far as what really caused this transition in our relationship, and why I am where I am right now.
And it's a long but short version of it all, because obviously it was longer than most think. And obviously I was there for the whole ride, and we were talking every week about, what was going on in your life. And definitely, like, a lot was there. I mean, our conversations would go from 1.5 hours to 2 hours of just us chatting, and you going through your thing. And, it showed. And once again, like, if Valentina, if you're listening to this, we love you. Because, like, the way y'all both showed up, so both of y'all, and at least from my perspective, and where I come from with relationships, like, got our bad one. I've read like over 100 books on it. Like, before I got into health coaching, I was into relationship coaching. So I'm being 7 years with Karina, we've had our own, like, freaking crazy like moving, you move it all around. It's not like a straight line. It's all over the
Hmm.
place. And I was just like, damn, y'all so courageous. And just like that idea of relationships. And this is why I wanted to have this conversation, is
Hmm.
because like most people won't do that. 3 years
Mm.
together, living together. They have this, and the book, you guys having that experience and transitioning away from being with one another to being solo, led me to read that book, that Unconscious Uncoupling, because I was just like, I'm so fascinated by people who can, you know, break apart but still be together in a sense, in each other's lives. I mean, and it led me to read that book and just like figure that out. It's not like I was reading, I remember like buying the book and being to Karina like, don't worry, this is not for you, this is for me to get a better understanding of how these things happen amongst people, especially how you guys were able to still be friends. Obviously I was even like surprised. I know the guys out in New York were also surprised, and I'm just like, it's so fascinating because
Hmm.
it takes two people who are like, in terms of their mindset, to be in a whole different paradigm than your average Joe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it takes something else to be like, hey, yes, we're transitioning, but let's be friends. Let's be in each other's lives. And I always wonder, like, why would you, and even, to all the ex-girlfriends out there who I don't talk to, I'm always like,
Mhm.
damn, like, not all of them, but like some of them would have been great friends, like
Friends.
really
Yeah.
good friends in my life. And obviously we had what she says in the book is kind of like a explosion breakup, where it's just like
Hmm.
it happens in a sense of like in the fire, like you're both fighting, arguing, you'd be like, you know what, it's done, I don't want to do this anymore. And you just leave each other and like never talk to one another again, even though this person was in your life for years, right? Like it's so crazy how most people experience that, but you didn't. And that leads me to get into like, ask you like how that conversation, and you don't have to share the whole thing because that's between you and Valentina, I don't think everyone should know that, but like, how do you come from a place of just so much respect, so much like, I don't know what other words to use, but like just coming in there with respect and being like, we can be in one another's lives without letting that history of us come back in, because a lot of people will go back to their exes, they start having sex with them again, and they start like building something, and like, maybe we could be friends with benefits. It's not the way it works, because you end up going
Mm.
right back into it, and then you break up
Mm.
again, and that's how you go to the seesaw of a
Yeah.
relationship. So I'm just curious, like, where that respect and like, I guess, restraint comes from.
Hmm. Well, I would say, first of all, like you said, like a lot of that I would owe to Val,
Mm,
because I even told her, because listen, I was the one who initiated the separation. She didn't, and I say that to say, like, if I was in her shoes, I don't know if I would have handled it as well. You
mm,
know what I mean? If I was in her shoes, I don't know if I would have responded as well as she didn't, and been as understanding as she was. I would assume that I would have tried. I would have done my best, of course. Um, but the fact that she was so understanding and didn't lose her shit on me, didn't freak out, and didn't, um, because she very well could have. People do, and she was like, "Nah, I get it. You got to go figure your shit out." And I was like, "Yeah, that's what I got to go do." And so she, I would say, I mean, anyway, she set the precedent of like, this is fine, this is cool. And then from there, I have an ex-girlfriend, um, uh, from high school, who we did not end on good terms. And um, I have attempted multiple times to reconnect with her, only because she was my friend. We were friends before we were friends before we began dating, and I didn't have any tools at the time when we broke up to know how to navigate that, and I was just like, fuck it, that's in the past, and I'll just move forward. But as I got older, it was very much like, damn, I would love to know like how she's doing. I'd love to know, like, if she's in a relationship, how's that going, how's her family, how's everyone, because you get older and you look back at your life and you're like, I was a different person. um, and the fact that she still does not want to connect with me, I'd be lying if I said it doesn't affect me. I don't lose sleep over it, but it's just like, damn, like that would be nice. It would be nice to reconnect. And so knowing that I had that experience, knowing that here I go again, coming out of a relationship, it definitely lit a fire under my ass as far as like, hey man, like whatever it takes, don't let your friendship get lost in what you guys had romantically. Because me and Val, outside of us being physical, we were really good friends. We had a really great friendship, and we've been there for each other in such strong ways. And I'll even she's been there for me in such strong ways that will be a person I love for the rest of my life, regardless whether we're romantic or not. And so it was really just making an effort to, as soon as I moved out, I would continue to text her good night, or good morning, or just jump on a call with her, see how she's doing, vice versa, connect. Like, it was just like, as soon as things changed, I just jumped into the friendship. And then as far as like the restraint and the respect, I would say it's not necessarily like a challenging thing, because like I said, we had a really good friendship. And we've even talked about like, what we, because we still find each other attractive. We're still into each other. So we've even talked about like what is sex in our relationships, because to me, sex can be on very different levels, and I don't see it as exclusive to a relationship type of thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be, and it's fun, right? Like, if it's fun, then have fun. But obviously understanding that, hey, we obviously had a very, very intense emotional relationship with sex, so we've set the boundary to not have that in our relationship for extended period of time, whatever that means, or for a certain period of time. And just being okay with that, just being like, okay, well, this is not what we're doing, but we still hug, we still cuddle, like we still enjoy each other's company as we would, because why not? Hugs feel good, hugs feel good. Hugs are good for you, you know what I mean? And we still enjoy watching Netflix or doing whatever together when we're together, so we're going to do that. And then it's just like, understanding that it's just being, I think, patience, like just knowing that things will evolve over time, and understanding that one-itis doesn't exist, right? There is no like, this is my one. This is my one person that I could love, and I can't love anyone ever again. No, we're going to fall in and out of love with people, along this entire journey. And understanding that, with like, time heals all wounds type of thing, right? It's like, as time continues, we know what we mean to each other is going to continue to change. And just being okay with that and seeing where things go. And that doesn't necessarily mean that, there's any expectation that we would ever get physical again. We may never get physical, and that's fine. It's just not closing. It's just not going from like, okay, yesterday we were being lovey-dovey and smoochy woochy and fucking, very kind to each other. And now that we're no longer in a relationship, we cannot touch each other, we cannot see each other, we cannot laugh with each other or cuddle with each other, because now we're no longer, like, why? What is the point? And so I think we both just recognize that, and so we just continue to enjoy each other's company when we do.
It's funny. A few things came to mind as you were talking, and the first one I want to point out to people, because it's so much embedded in our culture, is the fact that there's this idea of the one, and I put that in quotations, because I don't think, based on like the books I've read and like my own experience with my partner, like, I'm always like, no, you find this one, right? Because there's a biological aspect, and I also think there's a spiritual connection as well aspect to it. But like, there's this idea that when you're in a relationship, and I read this in a book many years ago, like scientifically, biologically, it's about a year to 18 months where your hormones are like blazing. So when you first meet
Mm,
somebody, serotonin and all these other beautiful feel good hormones, like the trifecta of love, I think is dopamine, serotonin, and I always forget the name of the other one. But it's like this trifecta that goes through your body, which is why you're attracted to that person. It's part of their smell, the way they look, what you were exposed to as a kid. Like there's so many like contextual things that come into your attraction to a person, as well as their the way they show up. And obviously there's that whole idea like we look for our parents in a specific
mm,
individual. Like it goes deep, and we could be here for 4 hours talking about that. But to skip over all that, like they say between a year and 18 months, those that chemical trifecta is happening, but it starts to wane. So after about 18 months, you go into from your passionate love where you're like you can't keep your hands off one another and you're going through all this, like, oh, I just want to be near you all the fucking time, to just this more companion love, which is the kind of love you have for like a sister, a brother, a mother, right? And this has been studied very much. If you read Aziz Ansari's book on modern love, he wrote it with a scientist, and they go over all of these studies and data. So really, when you reach that point of like about 2 years, let's just put it easy, I think it's you're more likely to be friends because you've reached that, you move beyond the passion, which passion is great to have. It's also hard to keep because all the other books I've read about like married couples, the divorce rate, and all these things is due to the fact that a lot of people, I had a friend, I won't share who this person is, but I remember them telling me about the reason why their parents divorced. And then they showed me the paper, and it was like it was divorce. And if you look at the description on the why, it was because they stopped having sex.
mm.
Isn't that crazy? Like,
Wow.
and apparently, based on this book that I was reading, like this happens to a lot of couples, like a lot of married couples, that the sex part just completely evaporates, right? Especially after they have children, and there's ways that you can keep it in, but it takes more work to keep having sex, because guess what, that chemical trifecta is no longer as powerful as it once was. So you actually have to work on building passion. You also got to work on your own individually. But it's like, I think you guys are in this perfect space because you have the mental mindset, but you also move beyond the passionate to the companion. So it's more of
Mm-hmm,
like that companionship that you guys have. And I think it was also accelerated at the fact that you guys lived
mm-hmm,
together for so long. And I know
mm-hmm.
you guys moved in fairly quickly. Like,
Yeah, a month into dating, we started living together.
you hear that, folks? A month into dating. I remember when you first told me that, and I was just like, what? Like, it took me and Karina 4 years before we moved in together. So it
Yeah.
was just like that whole like, oh, like this is shortened. So that means your relationship is definitely gonna time is just this weird thing. But I think because y'all were so close together for so long, your relationship grew at an accelerated pace. You
For
know,
sure. For
um,
sure.
because of that experience. So this idea, once again, going back to this idea of the one, I think we experience that multiple times, and in
Mm-hmm.
your relationship, you co-create that oneness together, right? It's like
Yeah.
Neil Strauss said in the book The Truth, is like in a relationship, there's three relationships happening. There's the relationship between you and yourself, them and themselves, and then the relationship you co-create together. You both bring each other as individuals into that middle ground, and the more there's this, they call I believe it's, what is it, the Goldilocks effect.
Mm-hmm.
There's this Goldilocks in relationships where you need to be somewhat different, but also have similarities. So you can't be too different, but you can't also be too similar. You don't want to date yourself unless you're an egomaniac. Um, you'll date yourself, but like you don't want to date someone who's way too different, who's really out there. So there's this Goldilocks that we need to find that's like this person is kind of similar in many things, but also very different, so we can have
Yeah.
that individualistic part. So that's what I believe in. And like I don't know how you feel about that moving into your next relationship, or if you and Val end up getting together in the future,
Mhm.
like what would that look like? You know what I mean?
Well, I think this is a great transition into another part of the conversation that we wanted to have, especially because this seems like it's going to be quite relevant in your own life
Oh yeah.
shortly. And it's this idea of polyamory or open relationships, um, or monogam-ish relationships, because just, monogamy is a commitment, right?
Mhm.
For a reason. It's a practice. Not being monogamous is a practice for a reason. It's not necessarily natural. And now, and I say that understanding that there is a spectrum. So
Yeah.
I do believe that there is a spectrum to between monogamy and polyamory, and that there are people who really are monogamous, like who really just want one person, and if that person fills their needs, they don't want any other person. And much love and respect to those people. That's great. And I think it's a spectrum. So I think on that spectrum, there's very few people, just like any spectrum, there's very few people who are on the far reaching ends of both. Most tend to lie in the middle somewhere.
Mhm.
And so I think for most people, and like you said, divorce rates show this, lots of books we've read showcase that this is true, which is that a lot of people struggle in their relationships because they want other people, or they feel unsatisfied because they've only been with one person. They're only with this one person. And I think before we jump into whatever ideas I have about polyamory or open relationships, I think this is a great place to talk about, things that are coming up in yours and things that are shifting possibly
Right.
coming up shortly here.
So it's funny. So I want to just rewind it a little bit and just where this came from, because getting
Mm,
into a relationship with Karina was, she was very much had the idea of Disney, right? Like she wanted the
mm,
Disney type of relationship. You meet your prince, live happily ever after. Obviously there's some trial and tribulations, but there's that idea. And in the beginning, and I'm so grateful. She's such an amazing woman because she came in open, right? Any
mm,
other girl would have probably been like, I can't do this. Like, what are you saying to me? I was telling her about like openness. I remember talking about Sex at Dawn. If y'all folks don't know that book, it's
yeah.
about the fact that humans are just not naturally monogamous. Like you said, there's a spectrum though. There's history and evidence that there were some tribes that were monogamous actually. The majority were not. Um,
Yeah.
so I had her read that book, and I tried to like get her to understand this openness, but eventually we ended up just being monogamous, and we decided to do that. Then fast forward, I'm not gonna go through all details, but I went to China. We did the long distance thing. Long distance for almost a year. It was one of the most difficult relationship decisions we've ever made. It was so fucking difficult, so difficult. Um, and because of that, when we came back together, we were like, we need to figure out other modes of relationship. We need to be open to whatever exists out there. So over the last few years, Karina has gone back to school to get her master's degree. Obviously, she's virtual right now. But the last semester, she has to go back in person, and it's going to be in Boston. So I'm like, I'm not going to fucking live in Boston. So we had that discussion. And she was just like, okay, I'll go live in Boston for the 3 to 4 months, right? To do this in person. And you'll just stay wherever we're going to be living. If that's California, New York, wherever the hell. So we're like, what are we going to do? Are we going to dig into this open thing? Because we were very, and so folks, Aubrey Marcus and Whitney Miller were a couple before, and me and Karina followed them very, very closely and listened to like everything they did. They're no longer together, and Aubrey Marcus is in a monogamous relationship with a new woman. It's a crazy story. But basically they were like our people we watch, and also Kyle Kingsbury,
Hmm.
another one, who we watch very closely. Like, how are they doing this? And I've always wanted to have this experience. I told her I want to try open. I've done it before, but that open was more of like don't ask, don't tell open. It was like you
Hmm.
do your thing, I do my thing, and that's it. And me and this woman had that for 2 years before we decided to transition and go into our own monogamous relationship. She went into one of hers, and I went into mine with Karina. So there's that, right? It comes from that, as well as, so I coined this term. I had this discussion with Karina about what if we were just relationship fluid, which I think is
Mm.
something that we as a society should look into, because once again, going back to divorce rates, not only including divorce rates, but all the other, and I read all of Esther Perel's books. There are so many relationships that they haven't had a divorce, but that are seeing other people, whether their partner knows or doesn't know. There's more people open to that idea of allowing their partner to be with other people because they want to keep their container because it's so beautiful, right? They love what they've co-created together, and they understand that sometimes needs goes outside the relationship, right? Which is
Yeah.
why I always say to people, your partner is not your everything. Like, they're a big part, but that's why you have friends, right? Jessie, and the guys that we have in our lives, but also, like my job and the people I connect with there. Like, there's other people outside of Karina. She's not my one and all, one and done, and we do everything together. Because to me, that's just overwhelming, and I don't want that personally. So we decided there's this idea of relationship fluidity, and what we're gonna do is during that time is open whatever she wants. I was like, you want to don't ask, don't tell. If you want to do, if you ask, I will tell. Do you want the full truth, details, everything? I'll give you that. If you don't, I won't give you that. Like, whatever you need. And the idea here is, like, once again, it takes somebody who's done the work. It takes somebody who knows their traumas, who knows where they come from, right? I'm lucky enough to have had so much love from my mother and my aunts. So when it comes to women, like, I feel like I can be abundant there and never and be okay, right? And for her, that may look differently because she was grown up a solo child, so she's working on that. There's a lot that she's working on in that section. So relationship fluidity, we're deciding during that 4 months to open it. We'll be in prospective cities, so it's not like I can go to her. Her thing was, I don't want to know who you're seeing in whatever city. I'm never gonna go to Boston. So I don't care, right? Like, I'm not gonna go live in Boston. I don't care. I'm never gonna go there. I'll visit. Yeah. I'm never gonna go.
I'm never gonna go there.
I'm not gonna go and be like, "Did you date my girl for X amount?" So, so the idea is that she doesn't want to do that in the same city. So let's be in prospective cities, different cities. Do whatever you want, 4 months, and then we'll see what happens after that. We may go back into being monogamous, or maybe we want to keep it open and polyamorous. So the idea here is just like, we do these bi-weekly check-ins, and then we do a big giant check-in twice a year, like 6 months, and then on New Year's. So the idea here is, when we get into those conversations, some of the things we talk about in our yearly check-ins is this still going good? Like, are we still in connection with each other? Is it working for us? Yada yada. It's a hard conversation, but it's something that needs to be had. We both say yes, we move on to the year, and then we say, like, what do we want this year? What is something that we're looking to try? And that just that idea exists, because I think if we made this commitment to be with one another for the rest of our lives, and we decided not to bring the government into it, so that can be a whole nother conversation about marriage, and why the government's involved, which I still don't get. And it's just like, get away from me. This is something that I co-created together. So we plan to have a commitment ceremony, like that idea of being together. We're going to take a page out of Tom Bilyeu and his wife's book, where they had a tattoo. We're not going to buy each other rings, because that's stupid. Thank you, Debris Diamond Company, for marketing the fact that you need a fucking diamond ring, which pisses me off, because then people go broke, especially my people, Puerto Ricans. They love to do that shit. They're very romantic people, and they go broke and they go in debt to buy a fucking ring that doesn't fucking matter. You know what I mean? Like, to me, it makes no sense. Do something else. So we've decided to do what we're going to call a commitment ceremony, but that's the idea here. So be open to that, relationship fluid, that idea come in, and really work towards that. Is it going to work? Folks, I don't know. I know that I'm open enough to have to try the experiment, because life is a grand experiment. Life is a video game. And sometimes I feel like I'm playing the game right, especially if I decide to try to jump into something like this, which is not normal. That's funny, because I don't want to be the normal average American. I want to be different. Anyway, so that idea. And you know, we had talks on like creating a community aspect to that. So what does that look like when everyone's open to be relationship fluid? Because when you're in
Yeah.
in this co-creation with people, things happen. Sometimes you just, you know, you've always been attracted to somebody. You may want to be like, we need to try this connection, because sex is more than just like a physical thing, it's also a spiritual thing. It's like, let's try this connection and see how we bond together in this really emotional, intimate way, and
Yeah.
have that experience. Like, why would you
Yeah.
remove yourself from that experience in this realm, this 3D realm that we are in? Like enjoy yourself, yo. Like, we created this life. Why would you stop yourself or restrict yourself from certain things? I understand there's discipline needs to be in some parts, and I know that the people have their look on that, but we were like, why would we stop ourselves, especially if we want to try? I always tell her, like, I don't know, the day is gonna come where you want to try, you know, I don't know, your own kind, Ukrainian. She's never been with a Ukrainian man. So I'm like, maybe that'll be a day that you want to try that, or you want to, you know, have fun with a different type of person or race and have a good time and experience that culture with that person. I want to allow you to do that. I want to be open to having that experience and let you enjoy, and then talk about it with your friends and whatever. And eventually our kids, when they're older and they can understand these things. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's a long rounded way of saying yes. Relationship fluidity is, I don't know if that I turned that coin, I coined that term, but I never heard it before. But it just came to me while I was reading a book the other day.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also important to acknowledge the fact that, like, you whether you realize it or not, right now is a time where lots of things are being forced into fluidity. Our relationships, not just with our romantic partners, but with our friends, with our careers, with the way the world's supposed to be or should be, is changing. You know, the way we, everything is changing. So it's not a surprise that for both of us this year, things in our lives, we have to open up to new possibilities in the way things work, because things aren't working the same. You also have to imagine that for such a long period of time, monogamy made a lot of sense, because you had, you know, there was one person in the house who was the breadwinner, and then there was one person in the house who was taking care of the family, and that was the only way those roles worked, and made sense. And but not anymore. You know, like exactly you said, Karina is going to Boston to get her degree so she can have a better career and do what she wants and all these things. You know, and she's growing in her own way. She has her own independence, which is beautiful. And understanding that, you know, we're gonna, you know, that it's not a coincidence that as feminism and independence of women's rights grows, so does polyamory and all these things. So it's so funny, because I find that a lot of times women who I interact with think that's a guy thing, right? They think it's a guy thing that that polyamory is like just a thing guys want because guys want to have fun. And I'm like, no, honey, right? I'm like, go read Untrue, you know, go read that book, and you'll quickly realize that it's very much a woman's movement, is into polyamory, and there are, of course, a lot of smiling men alongside them who are happy to participate.
Or not so smiley, because you'd be surprised how many men are like actually against that, because once again, we're going back to the traumas and, you know, oh, I'm being selfish, I need to be with my woman. No, she's her own individual, she does what she wants, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we are incredibly territorial, and prideful, and like, now you mine,
Exactly.
girl.
I mean, that's what I grew up with, man.
Yeah,
I was
exactly. Same
super
here,
jealous.
man. Same. I remember I dated this girl in high school, and I didn't speak to her for like a whole day because she wore a Justin Bieber shirt. She wore a Justin Bieber t-shirt, and I was like, yeah, I ain't fuck with you no more. I was like 14, you know.
Makes sense.
And yeah, I grew up in that same type of environment, which is like it's either me, like if you're with me, I'm the only thing that matters, you know.
Right.
And obviously, as we got into game and all these things, getting older, all those perceptions crash and burn. as you realize the true sense of sexuality that is found within women. But that also is another podcast on itself.
Big one.
And so I think, I think it's beautiful. I just want to acknowledge what you guys have decided to do, because I think people who are listening to this who find themselves in long-term relationships are going to see the opportunity that, hey, maybe maybe the solution is not that you need to go see other partners.
Right.
That's not necessarily going to be a solution for everyone, but understand that, hey, whatever it is, be open to it. Whatever it is, allow, because, and don't put on that pressure. Because I love the idea of relationship fluidity, because it's also like, let's not label it as a polyamorous relationship or an open relationship, because then it's like, well, now we're poly, and then they go, oh, well, Ruben and Karina are poly now, and then if you guys choose to be monogamous again, then be like, oh, but I thought you were poly,
Exactly.
And it's like, nah, we're just whatever we want.
And give them time, baby.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to what I was saying around me and Val, which is like, at the root of it is that you guys are people that enjoy each other's presence.
Right.
You know what I mean? You are people that enjoy each other's presence more, and you enjoy each other's presence romantically. And just because you're seeing another person romantically does not take away from the romantic experience that you're having with this person. Same thing with friends. It's not like, well, Ruben, you're my best friend, so you're not my only friend, and I don't want any other friends because you fill all my friendship needs. You know what I mean? It's like you do fill all my friendship needs, but I'm not fucking psycho. Like, I'm gonna go have other friends as well, because they too fill my friendship needs. It's not like, all right, these are all the friends I need because they fill every bucket. Right. It's like, no, you could fill my cup, but I also have more cups. I can have another cup that could be filled.
Exactly.
And where I stand on that is, I know for myself, I can definitely see myself being in another monogamous relationship in my life. Absolutely. And I can also see my life being lived in relationship fluidity as well. I know at least until I have kids, like that's where it is for me now, is like, until I decide that I want children, I'm not even going to be looking at monogamy, and that may change. I just came out of that type of relationship. So that may be why I'm feeling that way. I'm open to that. But what I really feel is my truth is that until I'm creating a home and a family with the person, right, I don't see any reason why I should be in a monogamous relationship, because the pitfalls of monogamy, I find, is what is that bias? One of those natural biases, like a commitment consistency bias, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, how much of is the insecurity around a relationship due to the overcommitment to that relationship? Right. And I'm definitely that type of person. Even like I said, I moved in with her a month into our relationship. I've definitely been a person in my life who has fallen hard and fallen fast for women. If you have A, B, C, and D qualities, then you are obviously the one. You are obviously the one in my life, and I need nothing else, and I want nothing else. And obviously, all circumstances will make sense for us to be together forever because you are the one. It's like, no, you are a beautiful person. You have amazing qualities and amazing traits. And there's also a bunch of other people who have the same for both parties. Right. And I feel as if, like, because so much of what my attention on is my purpose, what I'm creating, my spiritual practice, discovering myself, discovering what's going on the planet, just this curiosity as to how all these things work. I love women because I love their presence, I love their energy, I love their touch. Sex is fun, being with women is fun, just like being with guys are fun. I just don't want to touch their wankas, but that they're awesome to be around. You know what I mean? And so I want, I know that I want to experience a wider variety of women in my life, that and I know that no matter how much I can be enthralled by a woman, that she's not going to be the one unless I choose for her to be the one, unless I'm like, I'm going to
Right.
consciously commit monogamously to this person. And I find that there are a lot of people that feel this way and assume this way. And so
Right.
I'm, moving forward, that's just what I'm interested in
And,
is,
and
go ahead.
sorry. And something that I think is great, and this is for people, who are single, who are probably has somebody in their life, is about setting those boundaries in the beginning, in the fucking foundations of your relationship. You can't be 3 months, messing with somebody and just having a good time and just be like, oh, I forgot to mention, I'm not looking for anything, monogamous or serious, like you have to say that within the first few weeks, like you see it going somewhere, you're like, oh, I got to have this conversation now. And folks,
absolutely.
Guys or ladies listening, like that's not ever an easy conversation to have. I've had it multiple times, Karina included. And it was tough for Karina to, it took us a week. We didn't talk, for her to think about that. And for me to think about it and be like, am I ready to get into a monogamous relationship again? And do that. I was so heartbroken last time, and emotionally broken and mentally broken. Do I want to get myself back into that? So it's you have to set the boundaries, because especially and Jessie, I don't know, you're younger than me, so I don't know how the ladies are in your age group, but but I mean, besides Val, because I feel like she was already in that open space, like willing to be in that kind of space. And
I mean, me and her, we experimented open at a certain point in our relationship. Obviously before the shutdown, because once that happens, like we ain't touching nobody.
Exactly. I think that, and then and nowadays I feel like growing up for me, like women were just all Disneyed up, like they just thought they're Prince Charming, they're gonna find them, and that was it. Like it was just gonna be him forever or her forever, whatever wherever which way you go, folks. But but like that's not the case when you get into reality, especially as you start digging into the years of knowing one another. They say there's some, again, I'm going with statistics, but this can be different for anyone, but they say it takes about 18 months to fully learn somebody in and out. Like, everything about them. This doesn't happen right away. You know what I mean? I could spend every day with Jessie, we just met. It's taken us years to build our friendship the way it is today. And there are still things that you may mention, and I'm just like, holy shit, like I never knew that about Jessie. And there's certain things that you mentioned where you may feel the same. So there's always this like, removing pieces and learning about one another. Not including the fact that we didn't even talk about cyclical nature and like how we change every few years. And last thing I'll say, and you can continue what you're going to say, I read an article once about married couples. It was like an advice article. Like, if you've been married for more than 5 years, what is some good advice? It was something like that. It was a long ass title. Anyway, one of the things that I saw that someone said, and I was just like, this is so poetic and beautiful, but hard. It's that you have to learn, and I quote, you have to learn how to fall in love with the same person you've been with for years over and over again, because it's cyclical, right? Like you change every few years based on experience, your work, you have a kid, like all these things happen. So what does it take for you to fall in love with that person again? And that's just something that needs to happen. I feel like, with Karina, we've had to do that, especially with the long distance thing. We had to come back together and be like, oh, I came back a different person, but you are also a different person than when we first met. So we had to figure that out. You know what I mean? So
and as you say that's what I find very interesting about being open or fluid with your relationships, because I don't ever say that about my friends. Like I'm never like, I have to fall in love with my friends over and over again.
Right.
And it's like, hey man, let's make time for each other every week so our relationship stays strong. That's my whole thing with the commitment consistency, because it's like, if a lot what is inherent to attraction? Scarcity, right? If there's scarcity, then it's more valuable, right? That's inherently true. And it's like, well, if I know that I'm always going to be with this person, that this person is mine, that no one has any opportunities to swoop in and be with this person, and I know that they're not interested in any other person, and I'm not interested in any other person, and I'm not, no one's barking up my tree, and vice versa. Well, then, yeah, obviously the attraction will go, because you're so consistent with each other, versus like, if I'm hanging out with Nikita, all right, if I'm hanging out with Nikita, and then I'm like, you know what, I miss Ruben, I want to go hang out with Ruben now, and then I'm just gonna go hang out with Ruben, you know. Or it's like, oh, I love, I really enjoy these qualities about Ruben, but these other qualities piss me the fuck off. Well, great, I'm just gonna go hang out with Nikita and enjoy these other qualities, and then be like, oh, but these qualities about Nikita piss me the fuck off. And so that's why I love Ruben. And then you know what I mean? It's like, obviously that's not how I'm thinking about it when
Right,
I'm
right.
in it,
It's just
but
an
it's this
example.
oscillation. It's this
Mm,
oscillation of people and environments and situations. And I think the same rules can be applied to romantic relationships, where it's like, hey, I really enjoy these things about you. And these other things, we don't necessarily see eye to eye on them. But
right.
that's fine, because I don't have to be here all the time. And I don't have to commit my entire existence to your entire existence. So if you feel X way, if you like hot dogs and I like cheeseburgers, and I, go fucking have a hot dog with somebody else, and I'm gonna go have a cheeseburger with this other person, because I can, and there's no fire, around it. And I think I even think this can be done with, if you have children. It's just, so we're so consumed by this, the nuclear family, which is not a bad model. It's not necessarily a
Right.
bad model, but it's like, for a long time in cultures, kids would call everyone their dad or everyone their mom within their tribe, because
Mm-hmm.
everyone was their dad and their mom. To some extent, you didn't even know who your actual dad was. You know who your mom was, because, like,
Right.
obviously, but like, you didn't really know who your dad was in certain tribes, because everyone was just with everyone. you know um uh and I'm not saying that's necessarily the way it has to be, but like, why, so much of what we believe is right or wrong is just because we're used to it.
Exactly.
I don't see why we can't live in a world where, like, this is the mother of my child, and I love her, and I spend time with her, and I support her, and I support the children, and I support her. And then here is your aunt, who's also a lover of mine, and here's your uncle, who's a lover of her, and we're all here to help you grow and support you in anything you need to do and anything you want to become. And it's all love here. It's all
Right.
community here. We're all on each other's team. Why is that wrong? What is wrong about that? And we like to touch each other. By the way, we also just like to touch each other. We
Yep.
love to love each other, and we love to play with each other. We like to touch each other's skin. You know what I mean? It's like, it's so crazy. It's so crazy the way we interpret um, a sexual experience. And that doesn't mean sex isn't sacred. Of course it's sacred. This doesn't mean that, I wouldn't recommend anyone out there to necessarily go around just fucking whatever comes their way,
Hell
just
no.
because you can. And if you're in an open relationship, meaning that you're like, well, fucking shit, I'm ready to go fuck some hoes right now. Like, no, that's not, that's that's not my intention, at least, right? If I'm meeting women, I'm choosing to participate
Right.
in that type of experience with them, because they're in a good place. They have a good soul, they have a good heart. They're open, and they feel good in their own bodies, and that energy exchange is safe for me. If I meet a woman who is not necessarily in the right space, I'm gonna choose not to participate sexually with her, because I don't want that energy transfer. And she's not in, like, we're not connected in that way. So it's definitely continues to be a conscious effort. Anyone who comes into your life should be a conscious effort. um but otherwise, go out there and fucking live your life, meet different people, enjoy it, because you're gonna die.
Yeah, exactly.
You're
And
gonna
stop.
die. None of it's gonna matter.
Did
None
you?
of it's
I don't
gonna
know
matter.
if you saw my post the other day on Instagram. Oh no, I didn't repost it because I don't want to, feed that beast.
Mm-hmm.
So I forgot, someone shared it and I went to the page because it was like a girl doing a reel.
Mm-hmm.
It was like reasons why I let my boyfriend have other like girlfriends, not like she's the girlfriend,
Mm-hmm.
girlfriends. And then she like points to things, it's all blank. So there's no reasons saying
Mm-hmm.
you can't have, as my man, you can't have girlfriends. And like I commented on it because I was like, this is the most retarded. Sorry, let me not. I didn't use that word. I said this is the stupidest post I've ever seen, and you're just making it okay for people to continue with their traumas, and to eventually have a very unhealthy relationship
Mm-hmm.
with this person. Because guess what? You're gonna meet other men as a woman, right? At your job, your best friend's boyfriends, your guy friends, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And he's gonna also meet other women in the workplace and through your friends and all that. And you don't know what that connection may be like, right? Why would you sever a connection that can be created, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that person's life. If I get close, I haven't, but like, they're cool. But if I got close to one of Karina's friends, like she'd be totally down with that. Like that's cool. She's that type of woman. This is why we've been together for so long. Because if she was anything else other than that, and was just like, you can't talk to my friends privately, whatever, because I don't
Yeah.
trust you. We have built so much trust that she trusts the fact that I will be honest with those conversations and whatnot. You know what I mean? I've hung out with girls solo, 1-to-1 with some of my friends, and Karina never even bat an eye on it, felt any specific way. And I ask her, right, like, yo, be honest with me. Please be open. That's the only way we're going to be successful. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
same with me. And she's hung out with guys solo with other friends, and those guys were single and attractive. And I'm like, this makes me excited because
Mm-hmm.
these guys may flirt with her. And I'm like, I'm the guy. And she comes home to me. And she may be turned
Mm-hmm.
on because she got her temperature. And, you probably learned this from game, for my fellas
Mm-hmm.
in the game. Like, a girl is going to experience because she's getting hit on and all these things. Her temperature is raising throughout the night. She comes home to you. She's already hot, and feeling it. And she wants what you can give her. And she gets to come home. You don't doing any of the work. You don't got to go out and buy her a drink and flirt and do all these things. No, she's already come home to you like that. It's easy. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always like, why are people, and that's something that I continuously see online when I talk to, the young men, right, that I'm in the group. Like I have my men's group here, and like when we talk about relationship, you hear this a lot about the girl is like jealous and yada yada yada. And I'm like, she's jealous because she's insecure. She needs to fix that. She needs to go see a professional, get some help, or read books. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not hard. Yes, it takes time, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not hard, like, to figure that
Yeah.
out and to move beyond that. It's just respect. Like people are in their own journeys, but if you really want to have probably a bombastic and beautiful relationship,
Bombastic.
bombastic, you want to have a beautiful relationship with your partner and have the utmost trust, which is the most attractive thing that you can have in your partner, and the most respect you can get from your partner is through that trust. You have to be willing to be like, you do your thing. I'm always like, and you talked about something earlier about scarcity. I love the
Mm-hmm.
idea of abundance. I've been in a place of abundance. And when I won't say I chose Karina, we chose each other. But when we were in that space, she was seeing other people, and so was I when we met each
Mm-hmm.
other, right? So we both came from a place of abundance because we had
Yeah.
people where it was just like, this doesn't work. Cool. I have 3 other girls that I'm messing with right now that I have a great
Mm-hmm.
relationship with, fantastic women, right? But I decided to move forward with her. And she also had, I think it was 1 or 2 guys on her end,
Mm-hmm.
and she was going through, right? Until she met me. So we came from a place of abundance, which I love. Like if you don't have, if obviously everyone's different again, but I love the fact that you were talking about that scarcity, because I think we tend to choose someone more likely, even though
Mm-hmm.
we may ignore the red flags because we're in scarcity. So I always say, take your time when you're trying to choose somebody.
Absolutely.
Take your
You know, that's
time.
that's definitely one of the, like, I mentioned this earlier. It's like that's definitely one of the other things, um, because in some ways the polyamory of myself will be a boundary for people.
Mhm.
Will be a boundary for myself, because like I said, I fall hard and I fall fast, and it's just because I'm a loving person and I'm a Taurus, so I'm a very much of a homebody type of guy, and I just like, I like that domestic shit. I like that domestic shit. You know, it's part of me. I'm not gonna lie, and um, but I definitely get to take my time moving forward when I meet women. And if I find someone particularly fascinating, um, uh, to really allow it to flourish, over time. And time means months, maybe even years,
Yep.
because we live in a different world. We like, things take time. Things that things that we care about and that matter take time, and we always have more time than we think. We have less time than we think, but we also have more time than we think.
Contradiction, man.
You
It's
know,
crazy. Gotta live in the
and so,
contradiction.
yeah, and so I think when it comes to relationships, we definitely have more time than we think, to allow them to be what they need to be. And so with that, that's all I'd say is allow yourself to be open to all the different possibilities with your romantic partners,
Mm-hmm.
and allow time to show you what's true with them, because uh, you setting up you setting locks and keys around, you can do this and you can't do that, and this is what this is supposed to be, and this is what that's supposed to be, and all these different things, and it's and jealousy, and like these are all valid feelings, because this is the culture that we grew up in, for
Right.
many of us. But allow yourself to be educated on different possibilities, because I think we're moving into a world where there's going to be so many new possibilities that we're going to have to
Right.
engage with. Not just, again, as I started the podcast, not just within our romantic relationships, within everything. We're going to engage with the world in a very different
Our
place.
relationship to life. So technically,
Mhm.
it's
Yeah,
still
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, our relationship to life is continuously going to evolve and change. It's going to change even faster than it already has. A few years ago, the iPod came out, right? That was only what, like 2000, 2001, 2000, I don't even know, 2005.
I think so. 2005, 4 or
Yeah,
2005.
whatever,
I
right?
was in
That
high
was
school. That's all I remember.
the iPod. We still had fucking flip phones, and now look at us. Now look at what we have. So we're changing, man. Things are fucking changing, and you're either gonna have to allow yourself to be malleable and to adapt to new circumstances, or
1000%.
get eaten alive.
Right, right. Yeah, eaten alive and be, dies a solo and very unhappy death. You know what I mean? Everything is going to be community now, and I think it's like you said, that malleable idea of just being adaptable, just in general,
Mhm,
just like you have to, because if not,
mhm,
you're losing. You're losing the
mhm.
game of life. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
You want to win at the game of life.
yeah. And if anything we've talked about triggers you, great. Go figure out why. Because
Yeah,
these things have triggered me. When
right.
actually similar, when we started listening to Aubrey and Whitney talk about their experience, that shit triggered the fuck out of me. I was
Right.
like, what do you mean? What do
Right.
you mean this is happening? What do you mean you're doing this? What do you mean you're allowing this to happen? Same thing with Kyle Kingsbury. When I heard his stories about open relationships, like, fuck that shit. I was
Right.
all over, like, fuck that shit.
Right.
But then, you ask why. You ask why. And don't assume that jealousy is natural. That's one of the biggest things. That's one of the biggest deflections I have. It's like, I'm just naturally a jealous person. It's like, no, you're not. You're not naturally a jealous person. There's nothing natural about jealousy. I mean, or there is something natural about jealousy, but there's also something natural about heart disease. It doesn't mean that these things can get fixed or changed. You
Right.
know what I mean? Um,
And jealousy
uh,
just stems from fear, your fear of just
yeah, yeah,
someone
and it's a
choosing someone
spectrum.
else.
It's a spectrum. Like, there's a spectrum to anger, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's an appropriate amount of anger that you can have because you're a person, and that's natural emotion. But if you just go around breaking shit and punching people in the face, that's a poor way of regulating your anger. Same thing with jealousy, right? If you can acknowledge that, hey, I feel insecure because this person is a very attractive person and they're with another person that I care deeply about and want that person to care about me. And you be like, I feel this way. Okay, you feel that way. I understand that you feel that way. But if you go, hey, you can't talk to anybody because I'm a jealous person, well, that's a poor way of regulating your jealousy, my friend. And so you should probably sort that out. Or if you don't talk to your girlfriend because she's wearing a Justin Bieber t-shirt, that's probably not a great form of jealousy. It's probably not a supportive form of jealousy. So just, if any of these things have come up for you during this episode, just sit with that, figure out, why and how you feel that way.
Yeah, folks, and I'll provide the links of some of the books that we talked about and some that we didn't even get to talk about, because there's so many great relationship books out there that talk about these topics. So check it out in the description below. Please feel free to reach out to us if you have any follow-up questions. If you want us to do another episode of this, because there's so many pieces that we were like, that would be a whole episode on its own. If you like us to go over that, like, we can totally do that. Just let us know. And yeah, man, any final words before we, jump off this podcast?
No, I think the only thing I would say is, allow yourself to be open, because this is a time of change for all of us. And so open up, let yourself be astounded by what you're capable of and what scenarios you're capable of when you allow them to exist.
And just remember, I'll leave y'all with this. Love is infinite. There's no limit to who you can love, how much you can love, right? There's no limit to it. So if you believe that, you're obviously going to create that in your life, a limitation to love or receiving love. But if you believe that it's infinite and it's unlimited, you'll be bountiful in love and also giving of that love. So always remember, y'all, love is infinite. Let's close it out there. See y'all next week. Peace.